Butty Boy is the Reluctant Fell Runner. Season 2, Episode 9. Owain, King of the Cumbrians. JB's phone rang. He could see from the caller ID that it was Camo. "Hi Camo," he said. "What's up?"
"I've been thinking,"
Camo started. "Here we go," thought JB. "Oh yeah?" he said. "What's that?"
"Well, next club meeting, with just the two of us cleaning our things out and shutting up shop. It's going to be depressing, isn't it? I thought, well, we could cheer us up like. If from now on we're just going to be out by ourselves, we might as well make an effort. Well, if it's going to come to an end, let's make the effort and go into Wash Day and go up Scuffle Pickle, the biggest mountain in England,"
said Camo. All right. When were you thinking?" said JB.
This coming Sunday,"
he said. "If we can get back for 1 p.m, then I'll do it," said JB. "Family won't be happy if I'm out all day."
"OK, let's work backwards then," said
Camo.
2 hours drive back, so that's 11. 2 hours to get up and down, say, so that's 9. 2 hours to drive there, so that's 7. So, if I pick you up at 6, we should be done in plenty of time."
"OK, we'll do that then," said JB. They arrived at Wash Day Head and had to fight through lots of tourists to find a parking spot. "Looks busy," said JB.
"Bloody hell," said Camo. "It's the first clear day for a while, and there'll be good views on the tops, so everyone's had the same idea, haven't they? It will be like Blackpool Beach on a boiling hot summer's day up there. It'll be packed. I know, let's do New Bike Fell instead. No one will be on that, and we can look across at Scuffle Pickle. Be almost the same. Oh, I can't be bothered fighting through all the tourists today."
"Well, I've always liked New Bike," said JB. After they had locked up the car, Camo set off jogging. JB always felt the valley was a strange place. The remoteness seemed to pull at your insides. It was clear and the sky was a pale blue, the sun too bright to look towards. The mountains in a ring around the lake looked like they had been plopped down out of a god's jelly mould. The valley at the bottom was strangely flat and cut up into green fields by ancient dry stone walls. JB had the strange idea that thousands of men over thousands of years had gradually flattened it to put their crops and livestock on, and realised that that was not far from the truth. After all this time, it still felt strange to be running towards a hill. The path towards New Bike took them behind a farm building. It was made of rough-cut, thick stones, almost slate, the stone long and flat, about the width of 2 fingers. The building had sunk and settled into the ground and become misshapen, like a fat man and his giant belly asleep in a comfy chair after a big Sunday afternoon lunch. The building was partially covered in an ancient moss so fragile to the touch it told of the building being untouched in centuries, and told of rain, a lot of rain, almost permanently wet conditions. Their feet echoed as they ran on a hard tarmac road, and then dropped to almost silence when they went through a gate and onto the path leading up New Bike. They passed between high ferns, and their breathing increased in pace and volume as the fell rose steeply up. Camo pressed on ahead as if trying to get it accomplished as quickly as possible. JB liked to look back at the green valley with the patchwork of fields cut up by the grey dry stone walls, and the white Wash Day Inn pub getting smaller and smaller. The higher they went, the more of the lake could be seen, and the mountain tops became their individual peaks. Scuffle Pickle over on the other side of the lake, a little bit bigger than all the rest. They were on an exposed side of the mountain. The temperature had dropped a few degrees. The ferns were long left behind. They were walking on a pathway straight up the mountain. In the bank of the mountain, little irregular footsteps had been cut by successive hikers. The grass was clipped short by the Herdwick sheep that roamed freely. JB looked up to the loose rock scree field ahead. The rocks looked like they had been carried up and tipped out. He tried to work out how they had been formed. Was it the top of the mountain exposed to the wind and rain and repeatedly freezing and thawing? The water getting into the cracks and splitting the rock up when it expanded during freezing. There was someone on them higher up, coming towards them. He was struggling with something. They followed the pathway up, which branched right to follow a path through grass and avoid the scree for as long as possible. It took them into shadow, and there was an undulation and lip of the mountain to their right, and the sun was over that side. The temperature dropped surprisingly, and the air stirred. They came out of the shadow and back warmed again, and entered the scree field for the first time. They were now closer to the man, and could see what he was carrying. He had on a heavy coat and a large red rucksack with a shiny aluminium frame. The thing he was struggling with was a large, expensive-looking camera on a giant tripod.
"No wonder he's struggling," said Camo. "Lugging that giant thing up here. What does he think he's playing at?"
JB realised it was the first words he had heard spoken since they had left the car. It felt strange and alien hearing the human voice up on the mountains. As they approached and watched him, the man, who was, to be honest, a little fat and out of shape, made an effort to come a bit further down the scree. He shuffled on his bottom using 2 legs and 1 hand, the other hand gripping the tripod and trying to stop the camera smashing into the rocks. He was sweating profusely. The man smiled as they approached. JB recognised the look. Someone who had been scared but now relaxed seeing other people in the same position.
"Hello," he said. "You're the first people I've seen since I got here at 5 o'clock this morning and set up here." "What are you up to, mate?"
said Camo, although it was obvious from the camera.
"I had intended to get some shots of Scuffle Pickle from the top of Newbike," he said. "I heard you get the best angle from a point further up here, but I didn't count on it being so hard. I never knew there would be rocks like this all the way up here. It's getting too dangerous. Every time I try to go forward, I slip back down just as far. I set off skidding down at one point and thought I was heading off the mountain." "Ha!"
Camo laughed. From his army days, he had developed a sadistic sense of humour. The man looked hurt from the idea of Camo being happy at the idea of his early death.
"It's all the weight you've got, mate,"
said Camo.
I am rather out of condition,"
said the man, putting on a brave smile and making a joke.
"No, I meant the camera equipment and your rucksack,"
said Camo, missing his joke.
"What have you got in that? Are you staying up here for a week or something?"
The man laughed a little nervously.
"No, it's more camera equipment," he said. "I probably won't use any of it. I just got carried away with the excitement of the shot. I didn't think this through. I've never been up any mountains like this. It was tough coming up the grass part, but this is tough and dangerous. So I'm making my way back down. Rather ungainly, mind you." "Yeah, you have to be careful on the mountains if you don't know what you're doing," said Camo. "You're lucky the weather hasn't come in. If the clag descends and you suddenly couldn't see the hand in front of your face, you'd be buggered then."
There was a sudden fear on the man's face, and he quickly looked around at all the sky, left and right.
The air clag? It isn't coming in, is it?" he said in a higher pitched voice. "The weather report said it would be clear." "No, I think you're all right," said Camo. "You got lucky. You need to be careful of these weather reports. Can change in a minute at this altitude. Yeah, you're right, he said. I'd better be off down then.
He went to move a step and slid down 4 or 5 steps worth due to all the weight he was carrying.
Oh dear, see, he said. It's not safe at all. I'm getting off here as quick as I can, I am. I don't think I'll be back too soon either. I think this mountain photography is not my thing. Oh, you'll be all right, said Camo. You've just had a little scare, that's all. You'll be off on that lovely grass in a couple of minutes, and it'll be something to show off to the missus about. What an adventure you've had, like. Oh, do you think so? He said, cheering up. Of course, said Camo. You've been a proper hero, getting up here with all that gear by yourself. Don't beat yourself up, mate. You got to 2,500 feet, and then when it got too dangerous, you made the right decision and turned back. You're right, he said, beaming a big smile, sweat dripping off his plump red face and off the tip of his nose. I did, didn't I? I suppose it is a bit of a hero thing. I might take some photos as a memento. He went to prop up the tripod for a photo where he lay on his back. I'd probably wait until you get back onto that grass, said Camo, sucking between his teeth. It's only 100 feet or so more down. You don't want to unpack here, pack up and set off back down again. Besides, you never know about that clag. I don't think it'll be coming in, but you can never be sure.
Camo looked around the sky, as if looking for the descending clag. The cameraman immediately scooped up his tripod and looked about nervously.
Oh yes, you're probably right, he said. Right, we'd better be off then, said Camo. Where are my manners? Said the cameraman.
He made an effort to lean forward, up off the ground, and offered his hand to Camo to shake. It was the hand that was on the ground, stopping him slipping, and as he did it, he set off sliding down the scree field, sending rocks tumbling down. He came to a stop, had another little slide, and then came to a dead stop. Everyone watched a few bouncing rocks disappear down the mountainside. Oh, far too dangerous, he said to himself.
Welcome to you,
said Camo. Camo and JB walked across to him. The rocks crunched down and separated as they walked, but did not slide down.
Camo,
he said, holding out his hand.
Gerald,
said the cameraman. JB, he said, holding out his hand. They looked at him, lying almost flat on his back.
Do you want me to get you up on your feet?
Said Camo.
That might actually be better. Oh no, said Gerald in terror. No, I've tried that. I'll slide down like this on all fours if you don't mind. It'll take me a while, but I'm far happier doing it this way. OK, we'll be off then, Gerald, said Camo. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, best of luck with the photography, said JB.
Oh yes, thanks very much for your help, fellows,
said Gerald.
Lovely to meet you.
They walked on, and they could hear Gerald take a movement, and then slide with the rocks down the mountain.
Oh,
said Gerald, and they stopped and looked back.
I'm okay,
he shouted up to them. Poor Gerald, said JB, smiling, knowing that he would soon be off the scree field and relieved to be on the grass.
What a Burke, said Camo. Fancy dragging all that equipment up here. What was he thinking?
He turned and got back to silently plodding up the hill. Soon the mountain flattened to a false top of grass, not scree. JB took the opportunity on the flat section to look about. There was one more long section to the top. The pub and head of the lake had disappeared under the edge of the mountain. All the mountain tops of this side of the lake were visible. The view of the ground was like from out of the window of a plane. The next section rose up. It was a scree field of larger rocks. JB looked at them in wonder. Each rock different, but of a similar size, as if sorted by a giant sieve. The scree field below had been the same, but of smaller rocks. They clambered up, sometimes using their hands, and then they were on the flatter section that led to the top. It was strange to see a pathway cut in the short grass at 3,000 feet. There were successive cones of stones that were called cairns, visible, leading up to a stone round wind shelter at the peak. The cairns were there to help guide up or off the peak when the clag was down and visibility low. On the top section there was a sudden strong wind from out of nowhere, and little wisps of clag formed and were whipped away. Gerald's fear of descending clag became a little contagious, and JB looked around to make sure of his bearings. He mapped out the route forward following the cairns, but more importantly the route back. He looked right to the way to a 3,000 foot precipitous drop, and heard Camo's words echoing in his head. "Don't go that way, or you'll die!" JB zipped up his jacket against the wind and put his head and weight forward into it. They made their way to the stone wind shelter at the top. "Let's get in here for a minute," said Camo, going into the windbreak. JB followed him in. "I hope we don't hang around in here too long," thought JB, thinking about the clag and the way off. Camo took his drink bottle out. "Where did that wind come from?" said JB. "Wonder if it's hitting Gerald." "No, it's just a high wind on the tops," said Camo. "It's a bit freaky how it can be like 100 miles an hour up here on the tops and virtually still 500 feet below." "Yeah," said JB. "Not the only weird thing on the mountains." Camo put his drinks bottle away. "Rather than just go straight back down," he said, "we'll go over the back of this a bit to another peak and then come back down the valley." "Okay," said JB. They'd made it up there in plenty of time. JB could hear the wind howling over their heads, and reluctantly he followed Camo out into it, heading over the back of New Bike in the opposite direction to the way they had come up. The wind was hitting them directly in the face and making his eyes water. He dabbed the water clear, one eye at a time, so that he still had one eye to see and not trip. Directly in front of them was the mountain Clark Gable, a round, bulbous-topped mountain, the ugliest mountain in the Lake District. JB ran and caught up to Camo and pointed at it. "That's one ugly bugger of a mountain, that one," he said. Camo looked at it and started laughing. He was still laughing 5 minutes later. They climbed down a rough rocky section, some parts of it on hands and knees, and came to a plateau with a wet marsh and an almost black-looking pool of water. Going through the marsh, JB's feet got wet with water and thick, clingy black mud. The water was unbelievably freezing cold. He turned his mind off the pain of it and ploughed on. When they were finally out, his merino wool socks and fell shoes were carrying water and mud for a bit and made a slapping sound on the ground. His feet were unfeeling blocks of ice, but when they started to warm and got feeling back into them, they began to hurt when he ran. He had that horrible feeling his feet were going to stay like that, but they gradually warmed and got back to a normal level of pain. The terrain was much rougher than the route up, and so their progress was slower. They had been going for what seemed an age, but had only come down about 1,000 feet, with another 2 to go. "Look!" said Camo. "Helicopter is up!" He pointed at the helicopter, about 1,000 feet below them. "Hope it's not a rescue mission," said JB. "Yeah," said Camo. They scrambled down a steep gully using their hands. They were on a steep, sideways descent. For ages, JB had to run with his ankles half turned over and all pressure against the same side. He wished he could swap the angle over to the other side to give his left leg a rest, but it was all one way down. Eventually it started to flatten out, and they were down to better paths. They jogged over a fast-flowing stream with a small but unbelievably beautiful waterfall. Some Herdwick sheep stopped eating grass and looked up at them with their weird eyes and ancient skulls, looking nonplussed at these idiot fell runners out in the wild when they had no need to be.
"Fancy nipping into the pub?"
said Camo. JB thought about it. I'm not really in the mood for a pint or a cold Coke, said JB.
"They do tea and coffee,"
said Camo. "Oh yeah, of course," said JB. "That would be nice. We're not too muddy and we've made good time."
"They don't mind,"
said Camo.
"They're used to a bit of mud now."
They hit a tarmac path and Camo immediately put the speed on and JB had to force himself faster. They were going surprisingly fast after the distance and the height. Ahead on the path was an old man leaning against a farm gate from the opposite side of the gate to them.
"Hello,"
said Camo going past him.
"How do?"
he said. "Hiya," said JB. JB thought there was something familiar about him and he tried to place his face. Slightly in front, Camo skidded to a halt.
"Hang on,"
he said, half to JB and half to himself.
"It's not, is it?"
JB stopped as Camo came walking back past him.
"Excuse me, but are you Billy Keswick, the famous fell runner?"
said Camo.
"Well, I don't know about famous,"
said the old man in a thick accent.
"But I am Billy Keswick, aye."
"This is amazing,"
said Camo.
"You are my first fell running hero."
"Thank you kindly, lad, I'm sure,"
he said.
"I did my best, I'll say that."
Camo stood there, his mind racing, not knowing what to say.
"Can I shake your hand, Billy?"
he said.
"Sure, why not, laddie?"
he said, offering an old hand. Camo took the hand in his giant paw.
"Caw, you've a strong grip there, laddie,"
said Billy. "How about a picture?" said JB.
"Oh, would that be okay, Billy?"
said Camo reverently.
"If you don't mind my old face,"
he said.
"I never was a beauty, the nose. It might crack your camera."
"Are you kidding?"
said Camo.
"You look beautiful to me."
JB got his phone out and framed the picture of them. Camo leaned in closer to Billy, towering over him. Getting them correctly in shot heightened the difference. Billy came halfway between Camo's navel and shoulder and looked less than half as wide. But it was the different mass of bodies that was shocking. Camo looked like he was 8 times his body weight. Billy looked like a long-retired fell runner. Camo looked like a recently retired heavyweight boxer. "What's he doing running the fells with his size?" thought JB. "I have no idea." "I'll take a couple landscape to get the fells in behind," said JB, turning the camera around.
"Oh, this is ace! I can't believe it!"
said Camo.
"You and your rivalry with Tommy Makelin and the stories of the Norbert were what got me into the fells."
"Is that right, laddie?"
said Billy.
"Oh, he were a tough competitor with Tommy like. I guess we pushed each other on. He's been dead 10 year now."
"Yeah,"
said Camo.
"It were sad hearing that."
"All done," said JB.
"Here, give it here,"
said Camo.
"I'll take a couple of you with Billy for you."
"Is that okay?" said JB to him.
Well, I'm stood here doing nought else,
he smiled. JB stood near the old man, famous in the community, some records of his still standing, yet he was virtually unknown outside of Cumbria.
Oh, that's brilliant,
said Camo, snapping away. He finished and brought JB his phone.
You'll make sure you'll send them to me, won't you?
He said. Camo gave him the most serious look JB had ever seen, a combination of pleading and threatening. As soon as we get reception, I'll send them through, he said. Camo looked at him as if checking he wasn't lying. As soon as we get reception, he repeated. Happy with that, Camo went back to the old man at the little white gate in front of the tiny cottage with the perfectly manicured garden.
Do you mind if I ask you a few questions, Billy? For me training and that?
Said Camo.
Sure, why not?
He said.
No, not sure any of it will help now with all these mod cons they've got available, but...
Oh, great,
said Camo.
What food did you eat on the fells? Come to think of it, how did you eat normally during the week? How many miles did you do a week? What about your training schedule? Did you taper before a big race, or did you just run normally like? And you wore Jeff Astl's plinsolls, didn't you? What about the best way down Scuffle Pickle? Is it Devil's Crack Scree or...
Billy took a little step back.
Whoa there, young fella,
he said.
That's a lot of questions, that.
Sorry,
said Camo.
I got a bit carried away, meeting you, that's all. It's not often you meet a legend.
Billy shook his head.
If you've got so many questions, you might as well come in for a cup of tea,
he said, turning slowly.
If you've the time.
Camo's face went through a range of emotions, and he looked at JB, disbelieving. JB thought at one point he was going to cry.
Are you sure?
Said Camo, going through the gate before Billy could change his mind.
Of course I'm sure,
said Billy.
I wouldn't have said it otherwise.
JB followed behind Camo and shut the gate behind them. When he turned around, Billy was going in the little door, and Camo almost put his face into JB's.
Oh my God! We're going in Billy Keswick's house for a cup of tea!
Said Camo.
No one will believe us about this!
Camo turned back, not waiting for an answer, and ducked low down to get through the little cottage door.
Here we are, lass,
shouted Billy.
Will you get that kettle on? A couple of young lads want to ask about the fells and the old days.
Inside the cottage was dark, and it took a moment to adjust to the difference and get your bearings. Billy invited them to sit at a table in front of a little window. The stone walls were painted white, not wallpapered. There was a log fire going with a stack of logs by the side of the fireplace. Camo went to sit on a tiny wooden chair, and it creaked at his weight. JB winced, thinking it was going to give way. JB sat opposite Camo. Billy was in between them, facing the window. It was a heavy and well-worn oak table in front of the best light coming through the small cottage window. There was a white linen tablecloth with intricate white lace over the top. JB noticed there was something else, a different light and a smell. It was warm and strangely familiar from a far-off memory that he could not quite place. They heard the noise of footsteps, and his wife came in.
Here she is, said Billy, the love of my life. How did I end up with such a beauty?
She was an old woman with a strikingly beautiful shaped face. She would have been stunningly beautiful in her youth. She smiled shyly but pleased. You've not dragged these poor lads off the street, have you, to talk about your glory days? She said, putting placemats down on the pristine white tablecloths. She winked at JB and Camo as if behind his back.
"Oh no, we asked him about his glory days,"
said Camo seriously, not picking up that she was joking because he was so excited. She smiled at Camo. Billy went to squeeze her friendly around the waist.
"Give me 4 beautiful children and 11 grandchildren as this grand lass," he said. "I couldn't have asked for anything more."
She slapped his hand away in pretended annoyance.
"And you when we've got company,"
she said, smiling. She disappeared off through a door to what was probably the kitchen, and JB wondered what the tiny place would have been like with 4 children and 11 grandchildren running around. I bet most of the time would have been spent outdoors, he thought. It's tiny, but it's immaculate. I wonder who does that garden.
"Now, what was it you wanted to know, laddie?"
said Billy.
"Well,"
said Camo. His wife brought a pot of tea with a woolen tea cosy over and a little pot with a tea strainer because it was loose tea, not tea bags. They drank out of posh bone china teacups and saucers, the cups thin and delicate. Camo could not get his finger through the cup handle and held it between his finger and thumb. There was homemade date flapjack. Billy talked about the old days and his routine, his training, such as it was, his rivalry with Tommy Maitland, how they see his widow once a week on a Thursday by getting the one bus out of the valley with their bus pass. "Do you not have any photos or trophies up?" said JB, glancing around. There was a couple of photos of family and that was it.
"No," he said. "Sold all my trophies off. We needed the money when the kids were young. I'd rather see my kids with shoes than barefoot and a trophy on the mantelpiece. What use is that to me? I think the missus made a photo album at one point. I'm not sure if she kept it."
"Oh, I'd love to see that,"
said Camo.
"Really?"
he said, surprised. He called his wife and she smiled, and after a quick minute she brought through an old album and a tiny trophy that was tarnished and grey.
"What trophy's that?"
said Billy.
"I thought we'd got rid of them all."
"It's your first trophy," she said. "I wasn't going to let that one go." Billy looked at the little trophy.
"Well, I never,"
he said.
"The old Bounty Flops Fell Race, 1976, when I had to contend with Percy Pinkney and Smoky Pipe."
While Billy reminisced and Camo alternated between questions and listening intently, JB's eyes wandered around the cottage. There was something different. The smell. Something from the past was trying to tell him something. Oil lamps, he realised. The smell and the light. It's oil lamps. JB waited for a pause in the conversation. Do you not have electricity here, Billy? Said JB.
"You noticed? No, never bothered. It came to the valley late, you know. Last place in England to get it. So far out, you see. Me kids have all got it like. Our Victoria is nearest, just down the road. She's got it. Keep on at me to get it. First thing they'll do when we're gone is put it in. Either them or the people they flog this place off to. Never seen no use in it."
"No telly then?"
said Camo.
"No, what you've never had, you never miss," he said. "People seem like they can't get on without it. It's the modern way, I suppose. People always telling me it'll save time. Save time, save time. What do I need to save time for? I see them rushing about everywhere. Always rushing. Rushing for what? We make our own butter, you know. Always done that. We used to have a little small holding like. We used to have a cow, a milker, and a pig. When it got too much, we quit all that like. But we still make our own butter. Kids are always saying, why bother? You can pick it up from the shop for a few quid. Save time, they say. Save time. And what do I do with that time? Relax, they says. Relax. I can relax when I'm dead, I says. Ha ha. I see 'em racing about. Chuck the butter in the boot of the car. Or worse, some manufactured overpriced margarine. And then where are they racing off to? To work for someone else's business and someone else's profit rather than their own? Then sit in front of the telly to watch the antics of other people rather than their own family, friends and the neighbours? People are never present, doing what they're doing. Always thinking of the next thing. Well, when I'm making butter, I'm thinking about making butter. It's like meditation, the knows. I'm not thinking about racing here and racing there. That's why they're all a little bit mad. I think these modern folk are all a bit mad, the knows. I've seen television, of course I have, but I don't think much of it, to be truthful like. I'm sure I get more pleasure out of making butter than people do watching a TV programme. In fact, I can guarantee it.
You've thought that through, said JB.
Yes, I've seen this valley change over the years, with all the newcomers coming in, he said. I don't like all these changes. I used to know everyone in the valley. You'd have your fallouts occasionally, but you used to help each other out. If you had too much of something, you shared it. If someone needed a helping hand, you helped them out. We had a right proper community. Church every Sunday in your Sunday best. Easter parade. Fetes on the village green with everyone there from miles around. All the local kids running about. And bonfire night was one of the best. Went on for weeks when we were a kid. You'd collect firewood for weeks. Make a guy, borrow a pram and take it round knocking on all the doors for penny for the guy. And then bonfire night all the families would be out. Everyone went round to everyone's houses. The missus made the best treacle toffee bar none. The Simpsons made their famous black peas. Our kids had a magical time in this valley. But it's all gone now. The Simpsons are gone. Over Grisdale way, I believe. Now I don't even know half of these people about here. I blame the motor car. All this change with the invention of the motor car. And as for tourists...
JB and Camo shifted a little uncomfortably, being tourists themselves.
Well, I don't begrudge change, I suppose. I'm just glad I had my time when I did. I don't suppose young uns know any different, like.
Billy was looking out of the window.
There's Mrs. Brannigan,
shouted Billy.
Mrs. Brannigan, love.
His wife came walking through.
I'll just go and say hello and have a word with her and see if she's all right, she said. There's an extra piece of flapjack to take with you if I'm not back before you're gone.
JB and Camo stood up and thanked her. Billy carried on looking out of the window, and for a moment he was back in time and they were not there. JB caught Camo's eye and nodded at the door, indicating perhaps it was time they left. In a short time they were in the car, on their way back on the 2-hour journey home, with a wrapped-up piece of delicious flapjack.
That was fantastic meeting Billy, said Camo. I can't get over that. To think of them in that little cottage with no electricity.
Yeah, said JB. They seem happy enough though.
Oh yeah,
he said.
When I was a kid in big city Manchester, if you'd told me I had to live in a remote valley in Cumbria with no central heating and no telly, I would have run away from home. No chance. But he made it sound idyllic. He's right about bonfire night though. It's crap now. We did all that. All the families out. I used to love it when the fire had burned down and all the adults had gone in and it was just us kids left out. We used to put potatoes on the fire in tin foil, and while we waited for them to cook, we'd melt little bits of lead in old tin cans. I used to love how shiny and liquid it was. And as for putting bangers in post boxes, oh, enough said about that. Kids these days don't know what they're missing. Organised firework displays my arse. Here, pass us that flapjack, will you? I'm starving.
I thought you were going to save it for the wife to try. He glanced across.
I won't tell her if you won't,
he said, smiling. The last night of the club. JB looked at his watch. It was only 7:10. All their things were packed up in an old cardboard box he had found in the musky cupboard. It was a rotten night in more ways than one, with the wind howling outside and the rain lashing on the window. There was a draught coming from the ill-fitting door and whistled round JB's legs. He could feel the draught in his teeth and took a sip of his tea. Camo was oblivious to the draught. JB laughed.
What?
Said Camo in his half-accusing way. That weather outside, said JB. Reminds me of that time we went night running and it poured it down. We ended up at that pub dripping water on their carpet, and the landlady made her son give us a lift to our car. We ended up falling asleep with the heater on.
Oh yeah,
said Camo.
I'd forgot about that.
He was happy for a moment, and then sad.
It all feels like it's coming to an end, JB,
he said.
After meeting Billy Keswick, I thought that would give me a boost, but it's had the opposite effect. Makes me think perhaps it's time to move on. At my age, I'm not getting any faster or any fitter. I'm struggling to keep up with myself. I've been thinking I might take up cycling instead. Not give up the fells totally like, but slow down a bit in my old age. Take it easier and go to a pub and have a bit of lunch and not worry about getting as much height and distance in as quick as possible. Do you fancy that? Not keep pushing for longer distances and faster times.
Sounds tempting, actually, said JB.
Tempting good idea, or tempting like the devil,
said Camo.
I wasn't planning on giving up on the fells just yet. But you don't always choose your time to go out, do you? Look at Yorkshire and Three Courts. This time last week we were 4, and then in the blink of an eye we're down to 2. One thing's for sure, we can't keep the Lungsdale Fell Runners going with just the 2 of us. That's gone now.
I suppose you're right, said JB. No point keeping it going. What do we do with the association? Do we have to contact anybody? Yorkshire and Three Courts did all the paperwork.
I've no idea,
said Camo.
I say do nothing. Just let it fizzle out like. No one's going to come chasing for any minutes or anything, are they? It's not like there's thousands of pounds in the bank, is it? What was the last total? £1.53.
Yeah. Camo started to move impatiently in his chair, and JB knew what was coming.
Right,
he said.
That's it. I'm going to be off. I can't stand it sat here in this atmosphere. It's like a bloody funeral, this. I'm going to run back. Will you look up, JB? I can't face it, to tell you the truth.
Sure, he said. What about the weather? Are you sure you want to run in this? It's wild out there. I've got the car outside.
No,
he said.
I want to run in the rain. Suits me mood.
OK, said JB. I'll look up then. Camo got up. He seemed bigger and taller than usual. He went straight out of the door without looking back. When the door had opened, a breeze rushed in, and JB gritted his teeth at it. Camo slammed the door behind. Involuntarily, JB looked at his watch. 12 minutes past 7. The meeting was scheduled to last to 9. Well, I had planned on sticking it out right until the last minute, he thought. Can't stay here for another hour and 48 minutes. I'll go mad, with that wind howling outside. I'll try and make it to past, and then go then. JB waited until he thought it had been 10 minutes and looked at his watch again. It was 15:15. It had only been 3 minutes. He laughed, and his voice echoed creepily in the high-ceilinged giant box of an empty room. The wind lashed on the window, and the door rattled. A wave of fear went through him, and his spine tingled. He had not had that feeling since being a young child lying awake in bed at night and picturing unseen horrors and monsters. "Right, that's it," he said out loud. "I'm going to stay an hour now, just for that." Having made the decision to stay until 8, he felt better, and everything turned back to normal, time ticking away in its proper manner. The club was over, everyone else was gone. The weather was as dark and as bleak as could be, and the only thing to do was live with it and master the feeling. In an almost sadistic way, he enjoyed handling the complete negativity of the moment. Before he knew it, there was only 5 minutes to go. "You know what, you stubborn sod," he said to himself. "I'm going to make a cup of coffee and see this through this last hour." When he was making the coffee, the door blew open and made him jump. He turned around to go and shut it. To his surprise, there was a woman there with a young lad in tow behind. "I wonder if it's the woman from the yoga club looking to take over the spot," he thought. Bloody vulture. "Close the door behind you, will you, Thomas?" she said, "and wait there while I have a word with the gentleman." He went to close the door and wait by it while the woman came nervously across. JB guessed that she was the young lad's mother. Can I help you?" he said. "Are you just in time?" she said, clutching her handbag in her hands in front of her body like a protective shield. Yeah, that's me," he said. "Oh, good," she said. "This is a little strange, but I'm at my wit's end, and I wonder if you can help me." JB's thoughts were all over the place. I don't know," he said, surprised. What is it that you think I can help you with?" "Oh, yes, sorry," she said. "The thing is, now I am here, I don't know where to start." "Okay," said JB. "Well, I read your blog post," she said, "about the running club." "Oh, right," said JB. He'd forgotten about that. "Is your son a runner?" JB glanced at him. He looked young and fit. "Well, yes," she said. "He's always running. He does nothing else, and that's the issue. But, I'm not making any sense, sorry." JB smiled. "Don't worry about it," he said. "Just take your time. The issue you've got is, well, as you will remember from the blog post, the club's about to close down through a lack of members. There's only 2 of us left, so we've got to shut it down. We're still going to go up on the fells though, and if he wants, he's more than welcome to tag along." "That's more than kind," she said, "but I'm not sure he will come with you." "Eh?" said JB, confused. "Well, if he doesn't want to come, I'm not sure." JB left the unfinished sentence hang. The woman sighed, obviously mithered to death about her son. "He's had a bad year, you see. He loves his running," she said. "It's the only thing he does since his father's left. Since his father's left, he's withdrawn into himself. He doesn't have any friends, really. And as for a girlfriend, well, there's no chance of that the way he is going. I just want him to open up and speak to me about it." "Oh dear," said JB involuntarily. What do you mean? She said. Sorry, said JB. I shouldn't interfere, but most boys don't like to talk about their feelings, particularly when asked. They might talk about it when they feel they're good and ready. Oh, I was gathering that, she said, more happily. See, that's why he needs male company. That's why I'm here. Since his father's left, he has no male company, only me. And I know I am pestering him, but I can't help it. A mother's worry, I suppose. It's hard for a mother to admit, when you're not enough. But I know he needs some male role models. I can't help saying the wrong thing, all the time. I think he'll know you mean well, said JB, and that you love him. I hope so, she said, taking a handkerchief out of her bag and dabbing a tear. It was just that when I read your blog, and you were so honest speaking, and a man, and it was running, and the outdoors, which he loves. It's just that I'm desperate to do something. I can't just sit back and see him so unhappy and not do something. I hate to see him just disappear off for hours by himself and running himself into the ground. I want him to get more out of life. Wow, said JB. Well, like I say, all I can do is invite him along. I can't make him go, and that would be counterproductive anyway. We don't want to put him off the one thing that he is enjoying, his running. She smiled and put her handkerchief away. Well, that's fantastic, she said. I can't ask for any more than that, can I? He agreed to come tonight. So, is it okay if I leave him with you and pick him up at 9? We only live down the road. I think he will be more likely to open up if his mother's not here. Yeah, sure, said JB. But I can't guarantee anything. Thank you so much, she said. She went to go out. She spoke to her son and went to kiss him on the cheek. His first reaction was to pull away, but then he let her kiss him. His mother hurried out before changing her mind, and he looked around the room like he was reluctant to be there. Cup of tea? Coffee? Said JB. I don't like tea, and I don't like coffee, he said after a pause. He seemed to resent being made to answer. I'll make you a tea with sugar in then, said JB. The young lad Thomas looked surprised that JB had just gone against what he said. JB brought the 2 drinks over and sat down at the meeting table. You might as well sit down, said JB. Thomas reluctantly sat down. So your mother says you're a good runner, said JB. I'm all right, he said. That's good, said JB. Your mother will have told you the club is closing, but a couple of us are out on the fells usually once a week. You're welcome to join. Have you ever done any fells? What's fells? He said. JB smiled. Hills. Mountains. No, most of my running is pretty flat, he said. Well, you're welcome to join us, said JB, if you want to. Thomas sighed and drew in a breath. I know me mum wants me to open up and speak about me dad to you, but that's not what I want to do. He stared at JB angrily. JB had seen similar before at the martial arts club, and he let Thomas's anger wash over him. That's fine by me, he said. What do I want to listen to your problems for, when I've got enough of my own? I was only saying you can come up some mountains with us if you like. It's up to you if you do or you don't. The young lad Thomas looked shocked. Then he saw the wry smile on JB's face, and he relaxed and even had a little smile himself. To do something, JB took a drink of his coffee. To do something, Thomas automatically took a drink of his tea. JB watched Thomas look at the tea in shock, obviously realising for the first time that he liked it. JB quickly looked away so that Thomas would not catch him noticing. He resisted the urge to laugh.
"I've never been up a mountain," said Thomas. "Is it hard?"
"It's a lot harder than running on the flat, obviously," said JB. "But you look like you have the fitness and the feet to be really good at it. You're right though, it is tough, and it's not for everyone." A little frown went across Thomas's face, and JB read his mind. He was thinking, "I'll show him I can do it." JB smiled. He thinks he's hiding his feelings, but every thought goes across his face. Now though, what am I going to talk about for an hour before his mother comes back and picks him up? I can't keep making him cups of tea, even if he does like it. The door went, and in came an older guy. He had a neat grey beard and a brand-named hat, jacket and trousers. The gear looked well worn in, but clean and tidy and well looked after. JB thought he looked like he had been up a few mountains in his time.
"Hi," he said. "Am I too late for the meeting?"
JB got up, shook his hand and introduced himself. His name was Derek. Not too late for this meeting," said JB. "But it's the last one. After this we're shutting down due to lack of members. There's a few of us going up the fells about once a week. You're more than welcome to come and join us if you like, Derek."
"Oh,"
he said, surprised.
"How come you're shutting? I saw the blog post and all the comments. Felt sure you would be keeping it going."
"Eh?" said JB.
"All the comments on your website," he repeated. "You must have seen them."
"I didn't look," said JB. "I didn't think anyone would see it." JB got his phone out and went on the website and looked under his last post. There were 33 comments. "Crikey," he said. He scanned down them quickly, thinking it would be rude to read them all or reply while Thomas and now Derek sat there twiddling their thumbs. He thought he would do it later. One long message from someone called Wilson caught his eye. It said that there were 4 of them, students. They could not make this meeting, but could make the following one, and they would be up for the whole summer, and were looking forward to going over the fells and around Cumbria and the lakes. "Crikey," he said again, and did a quick addition in his head. With Thomas, Derek, him, and Camo, the students, that would make at least 8. I've not checked through the other messages. There might be more. The club had never had as many members. JB felt himself suddenly affected. What was presumed dead was now suddenly back alive. It was the strangest feeling. He had accepted the closure of the club so completely it was difficult to adjust. He had a very weird conversation with himself in his mind. But it's shut. It's gone. It's dead. We've spoken to Mrs. Gardner. She's expecting the key tonight. The ladies' yoga class are waiting for the time slot. Camo's on his way home. But Thomas and Derek are sat here now, looking at you, waiting for you to lead them on. And there's 4 students on the way next time. You've not handed over the key yet, and you could try and get Camo back. The first shine of a light at the end of a long dark tunnel flashed, and he wondered if he could trust and believe it. He pretended to keep reading for a few moments, while he controlled himself. He went to go to speak, unsure how his voice was going to sound. "Well, I'll be," he said. "I didn't think anyone would read it."
I think you hit a nerve, said Derek. What with this LRRC?
Blimey, was all JB could say. Could it really be saved? He thought. The door went for the third time, and a group of people came in, one after another. JB was staring at a familiar, determined face. "Paddy!" said JB involuntarily out loud. "Paddy Pinkney! What are you doing here?" Paddy, Percival and Pauline Pinkney came in, followed by Dwayne Pipe and his sister, Jacqueline Hyde. He gave his usual half-angry look. "Blog," he said. He pointed at his brother Percival. "He's the talker."
"Hi,"
said Percival, holding out his hand. Even taking a few steps towards JB, Percival walked with an unbelievable natural and effortless grace. "Hello," said JB, still shocked. "I don't want this to sound rude, but what are you all doing here?"
"We read your blog. Very nice,"
said Percival.
"We came to convince you to try and stay open and be part of the resistance against the LRRC.
Paddy cleared his throat.
"Sorry, Paddy,"
said Percival, giving him an apologetic look, and then he turned back to JB.
"We've not to mention them in his presence," he whispered. "There is a resistance movement growing behind the scenes against the you-know-who, and we need all the help we can get. We squeezed in a car and set off. Sorry we're late, but it's a 2.5-hour trip to get here, and we have to work, you know. We can't promise to be here every month, but we've put the word out, so you will get some coming. We could send a representative once every 6 months or so."
"You're joking," said JB.
"We don't joke about giving our word,"
said Percival with a serious face, showing his true Pinkney colours for the first time. No," said JB. "It's just a saying."
"Oh yes," said Percival. "Anyway, if we say Pauline is turning up, you should get a crowd. She seems to have a few admirers."
Percival gave her a teasing look. She never spoke, but her natural frown hardened a little, and her cheeks blushed pleasantly.
"When I say a crowd, I mean a fell running crowd," said Percival to JB seriously. "You know, maybe 4 or 5. Or 3.
"Yeah, that's a fell running crowd," said JB. He looked around at the crowded hut with the famous faces in for the first time. "I can't believe it," he said, half to Percival and half to himself. "It must be something if it brings the Pipes and the Pinkneys together."
"Why do you say that?"
said Percival. "Oh," said JB, caught out. "I mean, because you don't talk to each other? I thought your families didn't get on since the Scuffle, Pickle, Fell race of 1882.
"Randy Pipe won that fair and square," said Percival. "All Pinkneys are aware of that. Randy was the best runner of his time. There's no shame in losing to Randy. And that's for not speaking to the Pipes. We don't speak to anyone if we can help it."
"Oh yeah, of course," smiled JB, and quickly changed the subject to something more neutral. Would you lot like a cup of tea or coffee?"
"Oh, fantastic," said Percival. "Thought you were never going to ask. 3 teas with 2 sugars each, please. And the Pipes take coffee black."
"I'll get right on it," said JB. Derek had been listening and came up.
"I'll make the brews," he said. "You see to everyone. Can't believe you got the Pinkneys and the Pipes to turn up. You'll have a crowd next month now for sure."
"Thanks," he said, showing him where everything was. JB went to the table, thinking the old head of Derek and the young blood of Thomas could be good for the club. Looking around at all the faces at the table, JB was a little unsure about what to do. Usually it was just him, Camo, Yorkshire and Three Coats, with the occasional person one of them managed to drag along.
I bet their club meetings are really professional, he thought.
Well, I guess we need to discuss the JB tailed off as Paddy bristled. I mean, we need to discuss the you-know-who and what to do about 'em.
It's outrageous, said Percival. They are trying to freeze us out of the national championships.
The Pinckneys and the Pipes all grunted and folded their arms and banged the table.
They've told us the fell race at Washday Head has been removed from the list of fell races that count to nationals,
carried on Percival.
They can't do that to us. The Washday Fell race precedes the national championship. It was the actual national championship fell race before the British Fell and Munro Association was even formed. When they founded that, they begged us to join. It is in theirs and our Articles of Association that there has to be a fell race at Washday put on by our club as part of the round of championship qualifying races. And now they have sent us a solicitor's letter saying to cease and desist.
They can't do it, said Dwayne Pipe, slamming his fist down on the table.
If we knew who was running it, we'd set the mud spreader on their car,
said Jacqueline Hyde, backing up her brother.
We just don't know who it is. If I get my hands on him, I'll wring his neck.
JB thought of Three Coats and his precious Kashkai. What can you do about the solicitor's letter? Said JB, steering the conversation away from muck spreaders.
We have taken legal advice, said Percival, and we are believing the right, but we just don't have the funds to fight it.
Do you not have legal cover via your club? Said JB.
No, said Percival. It's the quirk of the constitution of our club. It's a grey area as to what the contract is, as it's so ancient. The right to put on a fell race precedes the advent of English common law and the Magna Carta.
Beg your pardon? Said JB. What do you mean?
Magna Carta was 12th of June, 1215,
said Derek, chipping in.
Yes,
said Percival, matter-of-factly. You say your family Washday Fell race goes back further than Magna Carta? Said JB.
Yes, of course, said Percival. Paddy is king of the Cumbrians.
King of what now? Said JB.
Paddy is king of the Cumbrians,
repeated Percival. JB, Derek, and even young Thomas looked about the Pinckneys and the Pipes. They all either nodded or sat there with straight faces. How? Said JB. It was the only word he could think of.
Paddy is the direct descendant of Owain, son of Urien of Reged. As such, he is the present king of the Cumbrians,
said Percival. There was silence in the room. What do I call you? Said JB to Paddy. Paddy, said Paddy. What's it like being king? Said JB. What do you have to do?
No different to anyone else, except for two things,
said Percival as the talker of the family.
He has to have a son, and his middle name has to be Owain, and he has to put on a fell race every year. Oh, and if the Romans ever invade again, he has to slaughter them all.
Oh, right, Nice, said JB.
There's always been fell running in the Lake District, said Percival. Shepherds' races, lords' messengers' races, all the way back to the ancient brigantes, looking after the horses and chasing the Romans about. The problem is the ancient nature of the Fell Running Club. You see, as king of the Cumbrians, it falls on Paddy to put on the fell race. In a modern legal sense, Paddy is the fell race. The legal challenge, and as such, the cost of it, falls on him.
Oh dear, said JB.
Exactly, said Percival. So you see our predicament.
Hang on a minute, said JB excitedly. Does he? He paused, wondering whether to speak to Paddy directly or through Percival. He turned to Paddy. Do you own your own home? He said, directly to him. Paddy looked shocked and nodded at Percival to speak on his behalf.
Why?
Said Percival. You want him to remortgage his house to pay for the legal challenge? If he lost, that could mean losing our family ancestral home, passed on down through the generations, as well as the ancient fell race. If that happened, Paddy would go down as the worst king of the Cumbrians in history. Perhaps even the last. Percival turned to his brother. Sorry, brother, he said. Paddy kept an implacable look on his face, but he and his sister were bubbling underneath. No, I didn't mean that, said JB. It's just that a lot of home insurance policies come with a legal cover section. It can protect you from legal claims, not just for the house, but for all sorts of claims against you, such as breach of contract. And your responsibility for putting on a fell race could be deemed a legal contract. Percival and Pauline looked at Paddy. Are you serious? Said Paddy. I think I'm right, said JB.
No, he's right, said Derek. If you have home insurance, there is most likely a legal claims section. The bank and insurance companies slip it in for their own protection. Houses can burn down, flood, get blown over. No one can be quite sure what can happen, so they slip in a general cover section. Most people don't know it's there, and they can use it themselves. The banks and insurance companies like to keep it quiet, see? But it's usually there, hidden away. Some people, when they ask for the list of items on their policy, that only costs usually about a tenner, cancel it to save money. You should never cancel it. It could save you a fortune. Most policies cover legal costs up to £1 million, sometimes even 2, maybe 3.
It went quiet in the scout hut. Paddy stood up. He stared at Derek and then put his eyes on JB. JB looked at the eyes. There was something different about them. Paddy put his palm of his hand up near his mouth and spat unshyly into it. He held the hand coated in his spit out to JB. Bloody hell, thought JB. But I'd better shake it. JB went to shake hands, but Paddy frowned and nodded at JB's hand. All right, said JB. JB lifted his hand up to his mouth and spat into it. Paddy took his hand and shook it. The Pinckneys and the pipes made little positive murmurs. Some even nodded. When he was close, Paddy purposefully held JB's eyes, and he realised what was different about them. They were green, ancient green Cumbrian eyes. Bridge, he said, nodding with approval. Insurance. Paddy continued to shake his hand for a moment, and then sat back down. JB sat down, wondering how to put his hand on his leg. He had a strong urge to wipe it on his trouser leg, but decided to wait for when no one was looking. After the handshake, everyone seemed to relax. Maybe the threat of the LRRC destroying the amateur fell running way of life made everyone try to enjoy it while they could. Maybe it was sheltering from the dark, the rain and the cold wind that was battering outside. Maybe it was a combination of characters, all thrust together by circumstance. But everyone was laughing and having a great time, talking about old rivalries, near-death scrapes on the mountains, neck-high snowdrifts. JB caught young Thomas laughing and relaxing, watching on the edge of it all. JB turned to Percival. "That handshake," he said. "It looked kind of official-like. With Paddy being king of the Cumbrians, does it come with any particular meaning in particular?" "Of course it does," said Percival seriously. "That's the handshake of the king. He's acknowledging you as an official advisor to the king." "Official advisor," said Derek, nodding at JB. "All right," said JB. "Does an official advisor come with responsibilities?" "Of course it does," said Percival. Like what?" said JB, suddenly wary. "Well," said Percival, "if the Romans invade again, you have to slaughter them all, obviously." "Obviously," said JB. "You'll be invited to the annual round table meeting of the Cumbrian monarchs," said Percival. "Table second class." "Right," said JB, taking it all in. "And you'll have to get the full Celtic art back tattoo," he said. "The what now?" said JB. "The full back tattoo in Celtic art," said Percival, straight-faced. "I've got a fire-breathing dragon. Paddy has the Kraken released, of course, and our Pauline has a giant black spider that scared off one or two suitors in the time." "Bloody hell," said JB, reeling at the idea and looking at Pauline. "That's right, a giant black spider," she said. "You can come and have a look at it if you like." No, it's all right, thanks," said JB in a far-off voice. JB's mind started to race in all different directions, giving him visions of all those tattoos. He remembered Paddy with his top off at the old county tops race, and he was trying to remember if he saw his back. The image came back to his mind. No tattoo. "Hang on a minute," said JB, and everyone burst out laughing. "I got you there," said Percival. "Crikey, you had me going then," said JB. It all settled down. "I quite fancy a giant black spider tattoo on my back now," said Pauline. Derek leaned in close to him. "Wow, king of the Cumbrians, eh?" said Derek. "Is it always like this round here?" "No, definitely not," said JB, taking in the unreal scene in the scout hut. He had a pang of sadness. "Car, I wish the lads were here to see this," he thought. "Camo, Yorkshire, even Three Coats, they would all love this." He turned to Derek. "I know you've only just arrived, but could you hold the fort for 5 minutes?" said JB. "Sure," he said, looking puzzled. JB turned to Paddy and Percival. "Can I ask a favour?" he said. "I want to launch a quick rescue mission." Within a minute, JB was in the car, with Paddy in the passenger seat and Pauline in the back. The rest had stayed behind in the warm and the dry. There were hardly any cars out on the road in the storm. JB hoped that he would not miss him in the dark, or that he had gone a different route. He was just beginning to think he had missed him. But down the long coast road he saw a familiar giant frame. The rain was driving down, You could see it caught in the light from the street lights, swirling underneath. Camo's back lit up when he went under the street light, and then darkened in between. He ran unaffected by the gusts lashing at him, but his shoulders looked drooped.
"There he is,"
said JB. JB pulled the car up alongside him and went the window half down. "Camo! Camo!" he shouted, trying to make himself heard above the noise of the rain, gusts of it blowing wet in his face.
"Some new members have turned up, Camo." "No, I've had enough, JB,"
he shouted.
"I'm not going back."
"I'm telling you," JB shouted.
"Some new members." "I don't care,"
he shouted.
"It's too much. I can't go through that again."
Camo wasn't even looking. JB tried to think how best to tell him about the Pinckneys and the pipes, with two of them in the car.
"Pull over in front of him,"
said Paddy. "Eh?" said JB.
"Pull over,"
he repeated. JB raced ahead of Camo and pulled over by the curb, putting his hazard lights on. Paddy turned around and nodded at Pauline. Pauline sighed about getting out into the weather, but opened the door and got out. She stood directly in the path of Camo, her long blonde hair blowing behind her. Camo came running up and stopped in front of her. With her chiselled cheekbones and blowing hair, Pauline looked like a Celtic goddess. Camo, with his giant frame, looked like a Viking. He looked at her, looked at the car with Paddy Pinckney hanging out of the passenger window. Camo did a double take back to Pauline.
"You've got green eyes,"
he said.
"Yes, I have," she said, "and a giant black spider tattoo on my back. Now can we get out of this bloody rain and back to the clubhouse for a nice cup of tea?"
For a second, Camo was stood there frozen, unable to move. Then he scooped her up and she disappeared into his grip. He held her aloft and screamed up into the sky.
"Yes!"
he screamed.
"Get me back to the clubhouse!"